Hi guys, my name is Tom and I'm the Tech Chap, and this is my review of the Moto G 2015. Starting from just £160 or $180, the Moto G 2015, also known as the Moto G3, also known as the Moto G 3rd Gen, features a 5-inch HD display, 4G LTE, Android 5.1, a 13 megapixel rear, 5 megapixel front camera, an upgraded quad-core processor capable of playing all the latest games, and a large 2470 mAh battery. Suffice to say, you get a lot of bang for your buck. Released in July, it's available in two models, the cheaper of which, this one, has only got 8GB of internal storage and 1GB of RAM, whereas a slightly more expensive £209 or $220 model has a much more reasonable 16GB of storage and 2GB of RAM. This review, as I say, features the lower end model, and although it's not perfect, let me tell you why I think this will be one of the best budget phones of 2015. In terms of design and display, it's not necessarily much of a step up over the 2014 Moto G. Weighing 155 grams and at 12.2mm thick, it's faster, heavier, and has a lower screen-to-body ratio, and also has the same screen size and resolution as last year's model. Despite this, it is still pretty comfortable to hold and doesn't feel that big in the hand thanks to the back tapering in to around 5.5mm on the edges. The textured removable back cover looks quite smart in my opinion, but it does feel a bit cheap and tacky. Having said that, the material and texture does make it very easy to hold, which is great, as you never feel like it's going to slip out of your hand or your pocket. Taking the cover off reveals the micro SIM and micro SD card slots. It's important to make sure you firmly click the cover back into place afterwards to reseal the phone, as the Moto G 2015 enjoys IPX7 waterproofing, which means it will survive being submerged in water up to 1 meter and also for up to 30 minutes. If your PC, laptop or Windows tablet is running Windows 7, 8 or 8.1, then installing Windows 10 is both free and incredibly easy. If you buy this phone online from Motorola directly, you can use their Moto Maker service, which allows you to customize the front and back colors, choose a case, and also opt for the memory option that you want. I opted for the black front, cherry back, and dark chrome accent. It's a great way of personalizing your phone, with options to reflect your personality, making it look subtle and refined, or really bold and eye-catching. With a 5-inch 1280 by 720 IPS LCD display, protected by Gorilla Glass 3, there's little difference between this and its predecessor, which sports the same size and resolution. It's still reasonably sharp at 294 pixels per inch, only slightly less than the iPhone 6's 326 ppi. As for the quality of the display, it's not the brightest around at about 450 nits at maximum brightness, although that is still a 14% improvement in my tests over the 2014 model. Color temperature is improved too, but still remains markedly cool and not overly vibrant. It looks good for a mid-range device, but next to more expensive flagships it does fall down a little bit. The Moto G 2015 features a 64-bit quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 410 processor alongside either 1 or 2GB of RAM depending on the model you choose. The new 410 chip sports a higher clock speed and a faster Adreno 306 graphics chip than the Snapdragon 400 found in 2014's Moto G. At less than half the price of the top-end Android phones like the Galaxy S6, LG G4 and HTC One M9, the latest Android 5.1 software and efficient quad-core processor means the Moto G really isn't that far behind in real terms. In the Antutu benchmark, the Moto G scored a less than stellar 22,937, that competes with 61,274 for the Galaxy S6 and 52,343 for the HTC One M9, which uses Qualcomm's most powerful Snapdragon 810 chip. Synthetic benchmarks aside though, in real-world use the Moto G's performance is surprisingly close to some of these flagships and highlights the diminishing returns we see with today's flagships in terms of its increasing power of the hardware versus the real-world gains in performance. Real Racing 3 is one of the best looking and most graphically intensive games available on the Google Play Store, and it runs really well on the Moto G. It's a credit to the performance of the Snapdragon 410, which, despite being a mid-range chip, runs the game without a hint of slowdown or overheating. You can be confident then that despite being described as a bit of a budget option, the 2015 Moto G is capable of running pretty much any game you throw at it, and it's a bit of a shame I could only get my hand on the 1GB model, as it would be interesting to see if there is any increase in performance in terms of multitasking with a more expensive 2GB option. However, storage is lacking a little bit. The base model only offers 8GB of storage, while the more expensive option comes with much more reasonable 16GB. Fortunately though, the phone does support micro SD cards, but only up to a capacity of 32GB. I would recommend opting for the 16GB model, as Android still doesn't allow you to install apps without rooting your phone on an external storage, so installing more than a few basic apps will quickly fill up your phone. It's rumored though that the upcoming Android 5.2 update will add a feature that allows you to format your micro SD card in a way that makes the phone see and use it as internal memory, which is great news, but there's no definite word on when this is coming. One of the main reasons the Moto G feels remarkably fast and fluid to use is thanks to the latest Android 5.1 software. The best news though is Moto keeps things simple by offering a near stock Android experience on the Moto G. Google's material design gives the phone a more grown-up and sophisticated feel, most noticeably in the app drawer, drop-down notification bar and settings menus. Motorola do add a few interesting features though. From the pre-installed Moto app, you can use the assist settings to change settings on your phone depending on your location. If you're in bed, for example, you can set it so the screen remains off and notifications are restricted to priority only. Within the app as well, actions guide you through your phone's motion controls. Perform a double karate chop action to turn on the flashlight, or twist the phone twice to open up the camera app. Motorola boasts about giving the Moto G a best-in-class camera, which includes dual LED flash and uses the same sensor found in the more expensive Google Nexus 6, also made by Motorola. The Moto G 2015 features a 13 megapixel rear and 5 megapixel front camera, that's up from 8 and 2 megapixels respectively on last year's model. On the face of it then, in well-lit environments, the Moto G produces bright and detailed pictures that are pretty naturally vibrant and pleasing to the eye. However, detail and sharpness does fade into fuzziness as you zoom in, and focusing on the right subject proves more hit and miss than it should be. In lower light, detail suffers and noise becomes much more apparent, which the dedicated night mode and flash do very little to compensate for. When it comes to recording video, the 2015 Moto G adds a slow motion mode and also ups the maximum resolution to Full HD, that's 1080p, at 30 frames per second, which does produce reasonably good looking video and also is surprisingly smooth and stable despite the absence of any optical image stabilization. Colors do appear a bit muted and there is the occasional artifacting, but on the whole it does a good job. Beyond HDR, a panorama option, and selecting a mode allowing you to adjust the focus and exposure, there aren't that many options for more experienced photographers within the camera app. For most of us though, this isn't a problem because a double twist action which opens the camera app, followed by taking a picture with a single tap on the screen, is an impressively fast and user-friendly experience. The 5 megapixel front selfie camera is noticeably less detailed than the rear, and colours appear unnaturally saturated. So there's no fancy 4K option, pro modes, or even optical image stabilization, but it's a solid step up from last year and performs admirably well compared to its other mid-range competition. Now, the Moto G's non-removable 2470 mAh battery, which is nearly 20% larger in capacity than last year's model, is surprisingly good. Running the Geekbench 3 battery rundown test, it took 8 hours and 26 minutes for the battery to fully discharge. If we compare this result to the 5 hours and 14 for the LG G4, 5 hours and 50 for the Galaxy S6, the Moto G 2015 would appear to absolutely thrash the expensive flagships in battery life by an average increase of about 53%. Strangely though, the battery score from the same Geekbench test actually puts the Moto G in last place, so real-life testing was needed to confirm this unbelievable rundown test. With Netflix running for just over 13 minutes on both the Moto G and Samsung Galaxy S6 for comparison, both of which had full batteries and brightness set to maximum, they performed identically with 97% of battery remaining afterwards. A small scale test, but it does suggest the Moto G doesn't quite perform the same as the benchmarks may have indicated. Typical real-world use for me includes web browsing, Spotify, checking social media, sending a few texts and taking a few calls, usually with auto brightness enabled. I don't tend to play games or use any particularly intensive applications, but I would say my usage is pretty typical. The Moto G then for me comfortably lasted a full working day and well into the evening with around 30% remaining by 10 PM. You could probably get a day and a half out of it with care, maybe even up to 2 with the battery saver mode enabled and extra care, but for most of us it will require an overnight charge. So the benchmarks exaggerated the real world performance a bit, but the Moto G still offers impressive battery performance thanks to the latest Android software and more power efficient Snapdragon 410 processor. In terms of charging, unfortunately there is no quick or wireless charging technologies built into the Moto G, despite the Snapdragon 410 chip inside supporting quick charging, and therefore it does have pretty average charge times. From 0%, about 30 minutes of charging will add around 20% of battery. It's significantly lower than the phones, including the Moto X, which do offer fast charging. Slightly strangely, coming from the Moto G 2014, Moto has dropped one of the front-facing speakers, so despite appearances there is only one speaker now located on the front's lower bottom bezel. Although a forward-facing speaker is still better than most phones, which usually relegate it to the back or the base of the phone, the Moto G's single speaker doesn't sound particularly nice. It's fine for the odd video or putting a call on speaker, but I'd recommend using headphones for a better audio experience. It's a similar story with the call quality. Clarity is decent and there was no issue with either calling hearing each other, but it's pretty unremarkable in terms of quality. A near stock Android experience, improved cameras and solid gaming performance makes the 2015 Moto G a worthy accessor to one of the best budget phones of 2014. It's not perfect, except for the addition of waterproofing. I think the design has taken a step back in many ways, given the size and weight and screen to body ratio, and the display quality, battery life, and sound quality are all fairly average, I would say. Despite this though, it represents great value for money, even if you opt for the higher spec 16GB model, which I do recommend. As mid-range budget phones become more powerful and desirable, they do raise serious questions regarding the value of top-end flagship devices. The Moto G 2015 is an incredibly capable smartphone and I highly recommend it to both casual users and enthusiastic users alike. So I hope you found this review helpful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and of course let me know what you think of the Moto G 2015 in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching guys, cheers!